rock and roll!
Well, judging from the carving on your desk, it looks like his name is Ozzy.
Yes, and apparently he rules.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
So, what if this woman had never run Lucasfilm? What if instead somebody else did? Another woman. A different kind of woman. This is about different kinds of people, where they're coming from, and why certain types of women, like this one right here, an awful, has no business running a Kool-Aid stand, let alone a film studio. In the last 10 years proved it. But let's talk about another kind of woman who actually did know how to run a studio. Marcia Lucas, George Lucas's first wife. So she did an interview, and the interview is connected to this Bleeding Fool article. And it's very damning of the sequel trilogy. Now, she goes off on the prequels, but we're not going to talk about that. This is strictly about the sequels. And she basically is one of the people that had a huge hand, if not the biggest hand, outside of George himself, at building the first movie and the first trilogy. She had been married to George when he made American Graffiti, and she was there while he was casting and getting prepared to make Star Wars. Now, fast forward, J.W. Rinsler, who passed away in 2021, his last book was about Howard Kazanjian, who was also one of Star Wars, Indiana Jones connections, and he wrote a book, a biography about Howard Kazanjian, and Marcia Lucas did the foreword. And she had nothing good to say about the sequels. She was frustrated, I think, with the prequels because she didn't know what George was really trying to say with them. But we're not talking about that. This is about the sequels. She criticized Kathleen Kennedy. She basically said, you know, I remember her being a Spitfire, and she was a real go-getter, and I'm paraphrasing right now. I don't know what's happened to her. I know what happened to her, Marcia. They gave an affluent white female ultra-leftist the reins of Lucasfilm, and she went woke on steroids. Now, you guys know that Matt Bellany, because I said this, said Kathleen Kennedy always had to be convinced of wokeness. How hard did they have to convince her? You know, but Marcia attacked the sequels for killing off Han Solo, and in the interview lately, what they did to Luke. Because the story is about them. It's about the Skywalkers, not about Rey Nobody. And Marcia, in this interview, proves that she can tell a story, and Kathleen Kennedy wouldn't know how to spell the word "the." Right? I mean, this is where we're at. Two different kinds of women. A woman who's passionate about filmmaking, who knows the technical aspects of it and the storytelling aspects of it, and then a woman who's basically never listened to a damn thing anybody told her, and on her own fucked up everything. All right. Now, the article from Bleeding Fool criticizes Disney. But again, The criticism I have with Disney is why they keep Kennedy so long. You know, these are criticisms that need to be asked. So we've got Marcia Lucas. She was there at the beginning. And she was the one with the team that actually ended up editing the cut we got of the first Star Wars movie that was so good. In fact, she and the team won Oscars for editing that year at the Oscars. And that was, I think they won for sound, and I think they won for best soundtrack. But that's, you know, it was, none of these movies will ever win Best Picture, even if they're the most popular movies, which is Snobsville as far as the Academy goes. But when you look at the cut that George first showed everybody, and it was a hodgepodge intertwined with World War II dogfight footage, no one knew what was going on except for Steven Spielberg, who's thought, if it gets cleaned up, this is a good story. This is a good movie. So she also, Marcia also, had a hand in getting Harrison Ford cast as Han Solo. Harrison, the story is, he was working for Francis Ford Coppola building bookshelves in the office where both Brian De Palma and George Lucas were interviewing actors and actresses for roles in the various movies that we're making. And they had interviewed Kelsey Grammer for Han Solo. They had interviewed, Sylvester Stallone as Han Solo. If you look down, Christopher Walken, and Kurt Russell came in, and I think I've seen that footage, and I think he did a good job. And Harrison Ford was there just doing the ratings. He was asked to rate for the part, and he did, and it was a good job. Marcia saw it and said, this is Han Solo, you need to hire him. The problem was Harrison had already played Bob Falfa in American Graffiti. George doesn't like hiring the same actors over and over again. And he had to be talked into it. And thank God he was. And with Marcia doing what she did, she helped Star Wars become the phenomenon that it was in 1977. It was a movie that, was released in May, around Memorial Day of 1977, and I remember seeing it still playing at the theaters around Christmas time. Because when a movie was that good, and you didn't have access to DVDs and Blu-rays, and there wasn't a release scheduled for physical media, if you wanted to see it, you had to go to the theater again, or you had to wait for ABC or one of the networks to play it in a bridged version with stupid ads. Okay, so Marcia carries gravitas and the weight of history when she criticizes Disney and Kathleen Kennedy. And therein lies the difference between the two women. Marcia actually could do things that Kennedy can't because Kennedy doesn't have the talent to think outside the box.
I've been basking in it for the last 30 minutes. My God, I feel like a seafront village after the Vikings have left.
See Denatech closing? 17 and an 8. Come Monday, I bet it's 16 still sitting there.
How do you figure?
Well, they went public at 23 with one product, plaque removing mouthwash. You know, you rinse, you get this glob of plaque you gotta spit out. I mean, maybe it'll be big, but I said that no one ever got rich overestimating what the American public wants to taste.
Maybe.
So you gotta ask yourself a question. What would Lucasfilm look like if a woman like Marcia Lucas was running it for the last 10 years? And when you look at everything and you see it for what it is, there would be lots of big differences. First off, we would have seen George's version or a version of George's ideas on the screen for the sequels. Her idea was, I don't understand why George didn't go back and tell Han's story before A New Hope, Luke's story, all that stuff, Obi-Wan. And we did get a story about Obi-Wan. We got Obi-Wan Kenobi, the TV show. And, of course, it got criticized into the bottomless pit of neurotic despair, which he's created. But I think having a woman like Marcia running the joint would have shut these people down. What I'm saying is, it's not the fact that a woman ran Lucasfilm. It's the fact that an affluent, white, female ultra-leftist ran Lucasfilm. And against what Matt Bellany has said, it didn't really take much for her to be convinced to add Vice Admiral Gender Studies, Kelly Marie Tran's Maoist diatribe, and a retarded director to do The Last Jedi. And then of course, we have Marcia complaining about everything else. She complained about killing off Han Solo. She complained about what they did to Luke. And I totally agree. You don't have to kill the characters off to write a good story. But because those two characters are so compelling, they took away from the characters that were created by Disney's, Lucasfilm, that are so weak, uncompelling, boreholes of woke shit. Rey, the best as ever, Darth Emo, Vice Admiral Gender Studies, and the League of Communist Girls, right? So nobody cared about them. No, if you're going to write a story and it's going to be Star Wars, even George has said this, the story has to take the lead above everything else. And every one of these movies that Kennedy made was lipstick on a pig. They were pretty, but they sucked. Why? Because the story wasn't compelling. And when they were called out for it, instead of going, our bad, we're sorry, the fans got blamed. The fans got attacked. Again, if any woman who actually knew what the fuck she was doing, Marcia Lucas, was running Lucasfilm, does anybody think for 1 minute that there would be a story group in any way, shape, or form, and B, would those people be allowed to go after the fans on social media? No, Marcia doesn't have social media. Neither does George, right? So you think about it, this guy, and we've all got receipts, would be gone, but I don't think she ever would have hired him because he's not talented. He's a techie, let him be a techie. He can work for somebody else. This guy never would have had a chance to make a movie because he wasn't the proper director. The Last Jedi was chosen on a first draft. Nobody does that except for Kathleen Kennedy, right? And this is also the guy that called the fans man babies. Would Luke have just disappeared into the ether? No, he wouldn't have. Why? Because that's not good Star Wars. No matter what anybody says, the sequels still belong to him, Han Solo, and Leia Organa Solo. They didn't belong to whoever Rey is supposed to be. And Rey Nobody is not compelling. Rey Nobody is a terrible character. Rey Nobody had no arc. She never made a mistake. She never had any weaknesses. Luke's biggest weakness was the love he had for his friends and his sister. And remember, Vader tried to exploit that twice. But his greatest strength was his forgiveness of his father. Right? I don't think anybody at Lucasfilm could come up with that idea but George Lucas. Right? So, we've got, why did you kill off Luke Skywalker? It's kind of his story. Then we've got the issues with Han Solo. First off, everybody knows Harrison didn't know where the character was going to go, and he wanted Han to die. He wanted, a sacrifice, whatever. Me looking at him going, here's another $20 million, shut up. Okay, thank you. That's all you got to do. And then give him a story he can be proud of, which really, look at the character, should not be difficult. But they hired a director who was weak. They hired the writer who wanted to kill off Han Solo, who probably hated working for George because George, it was his story, not Larry's. And, they did everything wrong. And now you've got the fans, led by Marcia Lucas, saying, what the fuck is this? When I look, here's the thing. When I look at how Peter Jackson did The Lord of the Rings, they did all 3 movies at the same time, one after the other. That's how you do this trilogy. So Harrison Ford can't complain. Don't, have every other scene with him in it. 4 or 5 scenes each movie. I get it added up to 20 minutes. And make it a powerful 20 minutes. Right? Dad talking to the kids. Mentor talking to mentees. Right? That's all you have to do. They, again, did not take lessons. Of course, how dare Kennedy feel like she has to take lesson from somebody as talented as Peter Jackson or George. She did everything wrong because, she can't tell a story. She's the one that said, instead of ending up with the woman, why doesn't he end up with the dog? That's Kathleen Kennedy. Marcia Lucas would have been, this is what we're going to do. This is going to make the story go forward, and it's going to tie the Skywalker saga up in a nice, neat little bow. Right? And then we can go back and tell other stories. That's all you have to do. And they didn't. She saw that. Now, she does complain about the other TV shows, except for Mandalorian, which she really likes. Because it was told in the way that Star Wars, a character-driven, you find out by dribs and drabs more about the characters. They have their ups and their downs. That's, compare that to Rey. Rey never has anything bad happen to her. She just suddenly can wield the Force. This is bullshit. Anybody can be a Jedi. This is bullshit. It's not Star Wars. Okay? And basically, Marcia Lucas is basically repeating a lot of what the fans said. A lot of what got us into trouble with Lucasfilm. Got us called names. Imagine if someone like her, a woman, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not the fact that a woman ran Lucasfilm. What kind of woman ran Lucasfilm? And if a woman like Marcia ran it, Star Wars would be fine. All right? It would be fine. I mean, she was the one that wanted to keep the mysticism of the Force when George didn't think about it that way. And now we have the mysticism. She complained about the prequels. We're not going to talk about that. But, she had a hand in building the franchise in a very intrinsic way. She was one of the founding basically cornerstones. And it would be wise for Disney and Dave Filoni to listen to what she's saying at this point. And yeah, if you read Rinsler's book, in the foreword, she tears Kennedy a new asshole. And Kennedy deserved all of it. This is Steph, signing out. See you around the galaxy.